So I just edited the whole video and realized that I completely deleted all of the beginning clips. I had filmed for like a week and deleted them. So hi world, it's Keely. Welcome back to another video. This is going to be the end of me talking about my online courses that I have been taking. And if you haven't watched the other video, you wouldn't know that I'm taking online courses, but I am, and I've been trying to document it, and apparently I suck at it. But here's what I didn't delete. Y'all, I am so tired. But I owe you an update. Today is a very overcast, rainy day. It has been a couple days since I've updated you guys. I've got a lot of reading done. I spent about an hour this morning getting some reading done, and then I just spent about 2.5 hours doing more of the training to get this certificate that I'm doing for work. And after 2.5 hours, when I exited out of it and then looked at my progress bar, I had only completed another 15%. I'm like, oh my God, I was hoping that it would have been more than that. So I am falling asleep. I am so tired right now. But I owe you guys a reading update. I don't remember if I said in my last update, but I did finish Jade City by Fonda Lee, and I did really like it. It took a while for me to get into it, but eventually I was like, I just wanted to keep reading it to see what was going to happen next. Unfortunately, I don't have book 2 or 3 because it's a trilogy, either as ebooks or physical books. So I did just finish the first book, which I had as a Kindle version and a physical book. That one had been on my TBR for a very long time and was on my list of fantasy to read this year. So I'm happy I got that one marked off because that was a chunky book. And then for my online classes, I finished week 2 of my historiography course. I had to read the end of Landscape of History, which I did, and then I had to read 2 chapters from Historical Research, which I did. And this was pretty interesting. Really, it was just talking about primary sources and how to work with primary sources, and then talking a little bit about secondary sources. The lecture was talking about primary sources and then ended with the curator of the archive, I think, at the Gilder Lehrman Institute. She talked about primary sources and gave examples of primary sources they have in their collection, and I showed my husband a clip from the video because one of the sources was 2 photos from the Battle of Gettysburg, and they were presented by the photographer as one thing, but then historians have since realized that it was actually the same image just taken from different angles and then edited. So it was really interesting to learn about that. And then there was a collection of maps of the United States from the 1950s, and the speaker talked about how they are indicative of what people thought of history in the 1950s, but also that it's important to recognize who created those, who is creating the primary source and for what, or who is creating the source, and how that particular set of maps was created by a map publisher to show the different quality of paper and ink that they had. So it's just super interesting that people would look at that and think that it was a valid source, but it was actually marketing, which is crazy. And so that was really interesting. And then talked about in the lecture about how you don't necessarily ever start with a primary source. You'd read secondary sources to determine what primary sources to look at. So that's looking at books that have been written by scholars recently about something from history, and then through what they're talking about, you can find more sources and work your way backwards, potentially looking at the primary sources that they used to write the book or create whatever document you're reviewing. You have to consider when you're looking at a primary source that the audience of a primary source was never necessarily intended to be graduate students. And sometimes they didn't know that there would be an audience. When you're looking at diaries or journal entries, some people wrote journals and they never expected them to get published. That was never their plan. So they didn't expect anyone to ever read them. So you get this extra level of insight into daily lives. And so, yeah, it's just been really fascinating so far. I'm really enjoying this course. I did the lecture, I did the quiz, and then haven't done anything for week 3 yet, because I need to finish this book and get to finish week 2 of the Black Women's History course. So this morning I finished chapter 1. I'm now up to page 37. It is pretty dense in terms of like text. So it is a little bit slower moving, but I am enjoying it. I will continue to read that. I am waiting for a package to come today. My best friend's son turns 1 in 2 weeks, which is crazy. And I got him a present, a birthday present. And then did I impulse buy a new 500 plus page book about the history of vampire scares throughout the world? Sure did. So what I'm gonna do is transition my brain from the Harlem Renaissance to reading about vampires instead. I have been really enjoying reading everything that I've been reading, but I just really right now want to read about vampires. So that's what I'm gonna read about. I'm very excited for this gigantic ass book to arrive today. But yeah, I'm just excited to read about vampires. Oh my god, just have such a complete change of pace, because I was talking to my sister, like, the historiography content, totally fine, but reading about sex and terror in the Middle Passage is brutal and very, very draining. And so I need something somewhat lighthearted. So looking at the history of how the world, different parts of the world, interpreted things to believe that it was like vampires is very fascinating. I have a lot of books about that kind of stuff. Do you ever go through, and I watch these videos from people that are like building my dream library, and I love that for them. I wish that I had the space to do that. I don't. All of my books are just all together. The only section of my bookshelves that is like one thing is my Frankenstein collection that is on my shelf over there. The top 2 shelves in that bookcase are all of my Frankenstein versions, and then books I have written that were inspired by Frankenstein or about Mary Shelley or about Mary Wollstonecraft. And then I have like my little Frankenstein shrine above it. But everything else is just kind of all together. All my fantasy, sci-fi, classics, weird books, nonfiction, history, all of that stuff. So I go through sometimes in my head and I think like, man, I would love to design a library and then set it up and have like, what sections would I have? And so I'd obviously have like a history section, like European history, and then I would have like American history, I'd have Black history, I'd have a sci-fi section, I'd have a favorite author section, so I'd have, you know, all of my Shirley Jackson books, all of my Octavia Butler books, all of my Ursula K. Le Guin books, all of my middle grade in one area, my horror, my queer books, my graphic novels, all of that kind of stuff. And a big section would have to be all of my books that are about ghosts or the occult or supernatural or things like that. I'd have a section just on vampires, because I have a lot of books about vampires and poltergeists and stuff like that. And it started as just being like a, you know, I was a teenager that liked horror movies, and so I like ghost movies and that kind of thing. And then it became like an actually looking at the history of how things like witch crazes get started, and feminism, and just like structures of society, and then looking at how people interpret things how they can with the knowledge that they have. And so, you know, we know that a lot of the vampire scares were actually people that had tuberculosis and they didn't know what tuberculosis was. And so the way that they frame it was that these people were withering away, and that they were, you know, very gaunt and very pale and very like frail. And there's some, you know, famous grave sites that have bars over them, and it's, you know, this belief that they would come back from the dead, and because they were vampires. It's like, no, they just had tuberculosis, or, you know, any other type of disease that you know, wastes you away over time until you die. I don't know, I'm just thinking about that. Thinking about like how I'd add this new book to that collection of all of them. I've read through the majority of all of those books that I have. Some of them I've skimmed through because they're more of just like, I think they're cool. I just want, you know, these super old books about vampires or witchcraft or whatever on my shelves, and I won't necessarily sit down and read them. Like, I have a dictionary of witchcraft that's from the 30s, something like that. And so that one I flipped through, but I'm, you know, not going to read that front to back. And then I'm trying to remember what it's called. I have another book that's specifically about this guy that studied vampires, but it's from the 60s or something like that. or the 1800s. I can't remember. It's like really, really old. It's either the 60s or the 1800s. I'm not sure. But that's, yeah. Just thinking about how fun that would be. And then I'd like throw all of Caitlin Doty's books in there. I have a bunch of books on grief and death and people that work in the death industry. And so sometimes I like to do that. I like to sit down and think of like, how many shelves would I need? How many bookcases would I need in order to have all of my stuff organized how I'd like it to be? A lot. And I've even thought about like taking down a lot of, I have gallery walls, obviously you can see all over my office. I've thought about like maybe just taking down a lot of the stuff that's on that wall and just getting bookcases to line that wall, but that's really, really heavy. Like books are really heavy and I don't necessarily really have anywhere else in the house to store my books. I mean, I do, but my husband would prefer that the bulk of my books remain in my office and my space, and that we have like a dining room that looks like a dining room, and I have a little shelf down there with like my cookbooks, but the bulk of our books are upstairs in my office, on my nightstand, and on a bookcase that is out in the hallway that is a combination of both of our books. And that's kind of where all of my books belong, or where they reside anyway right now. We were even looking at buying houses in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Not officially. Scranton, Pennsylvania is too far west from where my husband works. It just wouldn't make sense. But housing prices are so cheap out there. We could get a 6-bedroom house for like less than $300,000, which is insane and does not exist in southeastern Pennsylvania. The counties in southeastern Pennsylvania are very, very expensive housing wise. So we were talking about like, man, if we got a 6-bedroom house, we'd have like our bedroom, my office, your office, a game room, a library. And then he was like, oh, we'd have a guest room. And I was like, no, we'd have a second library room. But now I'm on my lunch break because yeah, my eyes are just super duper tired. I don't necessarily want to make another coffee, but I don't know if we have any other options for caffeine to keep me going. And we are going to the gym later today after work. So I don't know, maybe I just need to like lay on the floor for a while. But I also really want to get more reading done. But I finished up week 2 of one course, so that's good. I just need to continue reading this one. So chapter 2 is called Imagined Bodies. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get reading more of that. And then I will update you guys hopefully that I'll get this reading done. I don't know if it's going to happen in the next couple days, but I will try get something done. Okay, temperate update. It is now Friday the 13th. Yay. I have finished some stuff and made progress in other stuff and made a decision. So I decided that I would update you guys. Today I finished everything for week 2 for my historiography class. For week 3, I need to read the introduction and chapters 1 and 2 of historiography, which is a textbook that I have. And then I also need to read chapter 3 of the critical analysis of historical texts, which is in the Craft of International History, A Guide to Method. And that is another textbook that I also have for this class. And since it's going to take me a while to get through everything for week 2 for my Black women's history, but I don't want to lose my motivation and like momentum with my historiography class, I decided that I'm just going to keep going. And I'm just gonna do my historiography class because it also helps to have things to kind of break up the reading that I'm doing for my Black women's history class. I read more of the book for that class yesterday. This is the Slavery at Sea book. I am now up to page 44. So I did read another handful of pages yesterday. This is just going to be a very slow read for me. So I'm going to try to continue to supplement this with other things. Let me grab those 2 textbooks. So we have the Craft of International History and then we have historiography. I will go through and mark off with tabs the sections that I need to read for these. I'm gonna work on those. And then also this morning I had a good reading session and I completed another James Baldwin. I completed Notes of a Native Son. This is an essay collection by him, probably the one that I have heard of most often but have never read. So I finished it this morning. If I flip through, you're not going to see any of it, but I did write all over this one. I really, really enjoyed this one. Very happy that I read it. Next, I'm going to move to one of his fiction, which is Giovanni's Room, and that will be the next James Baldwin that I read. So yay, I've marked off 2 James Baldwin so far this year for my reading project. But today, Friday the 13th, I have been getting some work done. One of the things I need to do today is just like an admin task. I need to update my resume because I have not updated it in 6 months-ish, maybe longer. And when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, that stuff has changed. I do this thing more now, or there's like stuff that I do for my job that's just not even on there. So I do need to update that. It's good in general to just have your resume updated at any given time, but I want to get that updated. So let me go through, and I'm going to get reading these 2, try to finish another chapter. If I can finish chapter 2 today, that would be really cool. I only need to read 10 pages, so hopefully I can get that done and just continue to make progress on this one. And then I also want to start filming that other vlog that I've decided I'm gonna do. I wish I would have thought of it like a week ago, because today, Friday the 13th, would have been perfect for me to post it, but that's okay. Oh well. I did get a video posted for today, and it's just a very simple, like, read real time with me with outside noise. I was reading a chapter for the other textbook that I was reading, but I would like to get going with some stuff. The weather needs to figure itself out because it was so beautiful for a couple days. And then yesterday it snowed for like 3 hours. It had been so warm that the snow didn't stick at all. But this morning I woke up and everything was covered in frost. There were people like outside defrosting their cars. I was like, come on. I just want it to be nice and sunny and warm so that I can have the windows open and read outside. Because the day that I ran outside and read outside was lovely, and I would like to continue doing that. I'm also in talks with one of our tattoo artists to rework one of my tattoos that I got done a couple years ago, which I'm very excited about. All of my tattoos, I have 15, I think 15 at this point. All of them are black, white, gray, except for the eyes of the sexy Mothman tattoo that I have on my leg. Those are red. And so far that has been the only color in any of my tattoos. I love color tattoos on other people, but for me, I really much prefer them to be black, white, gray. However, that my tattoo artist that did the Mothman, when I was getting that one done, I showed him my other leg. I have a big tattoo on my shin of Bobby Hill as Baphomet tarot card tattoo, but unfortunately it just hasn't held up very well over the years. And I was talking to him about it, and like the ink just kind of bled, and so there are portions of it that you can't read anymore, and it just doesn't look how I want it to look. So we had talked about covering it up completely, and because he didn't do it, a different tattoo artist did it years ago. And when I was telling him, like, I'm thinking about just covering it up, he was like, oh, like, don't cover it up. That's a cool idea. So I emailed him yesterday, and I was like, hey, remember when you made it sound like you didn't want me to cover it up? Would you be willing or interested in redoing it, like reworking it? And he said yes, but he thinks that reworking it in full color would be better, like a good way to do it. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, I don't want to have a full color tattoo. But then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? I kind of love the idea of having all of the other tattoos on my legs, black, white, gray, and then just having like a bright ass full color Bobby Hill as Baphomet tarot card in the center of my shin. I just really like that idea of like Bobby Hill being like the center of the universe and being full color, but everything else being kind of crazy. Because I have, yeah, my left leg has 2 tattoos. One I'm going to get covered up because it, again, didn't hold up very well. And then the Bobby Hill tattoo that I am going to get hopefully redone this summer. And then on my other leg, I am going to turn that into my cryptid leg, because right now the first tattoo for that leg, well, the second tattoo, but the first tattoo for this cryptid theme is Sexy Mothman. But I have lots of other cryptids that I would like to get tattooed. Pennsylvania has the squonk, which is like the best cryptid I think there's ever been. The squonk. It's just like this miserable little creature that cries at how ugly it is. Love that. So I'm definitely gonna get a squonk. I have ideas for some other ones. I really want to get the kind of traditional pose of Bigfoot walking across the field. Like, I would love to get that. I want to get a Loch Ness Monster. Yeah, I'm just gonna have like a whole bunch of cryptids all over my leg. I thought that'd be really cool and really fun. But now I'm just stalling because updating my resume is not super fun, and I have been doing so much reading, but I need to continue to just do a lot of reading, and I might work on that certification program again today. I have until I figured it out. I don't remember. I think it's the end of June to get it done, and I'm over halfway through. I'm just now in like a very dense portion of it. So like yesterday I think I said in the clip, like I spent 2.5 hours on this one section and I only got 15% of the way through, which is just so much, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to get this done within the next couple weeks. That would be ideal, because then that's something else I could put on my resume. Let's go ahead and get some work done and get some reading done. And today is Friday, so we do pizza every Friday. We switched back to frozen pizza because it's just so much cheaper. So we just have like a frozen pizza, and we have a 2-liter of soda, and we have like a routine of the same type of video we watch every Friday while we eat pizza. And then this weekend, one of my favorite streamers, Twitch streamers, is having a birthday stream, so I'll be watching that and maybe doing a game night with friends. I don't know, but let's just get going. It is Friday night at 8:30, but I just finished the readings for week 3 of the historiography class. I had to read the first couple chapters of Historiography by Eileen K. May Chang, and then I also had to read a chapter in The Craft of International History by Trachtenberg. If you are following me on Storygraph and you're seeing I'm marking a lot of these types of like textbooks as completed, it's because I'm just reading the portions that are assigned for the class, and then that's it. The book is read, and I'm not going to add it to my TBR shelf. It's just going to get marked as a completed book in my reading app. But I finished those, and then I can move into week 3 lecture. I was reading some more of a different book that I'm doing for a different vlog earlier, and when we head to bed in like an hour, maybe earlier than that because I'm very tired, I will get some more reading done of that other book. I'm now over halfway through it and really enjoying it, but I just wanted to come on and give a quick update that I did complete those readings before the end of the week, so that's very exciting. All right, I owe you another update. I got some more schoolwork done this morning, and I am now waiting for my ramen to cool off so I can eat lunch, but I made a decision for one of the courses. So for historiography, I am now up to week 4, and for this next week, I need to read the next 3 chapters in the historiography book by Chen, and then watch the lecture and take the quiz. For week 2 of Black Women's History, I have been reading Slavery at Sea. However, I was really finding it hard to pick this book back up, primarily because there is so much sexual violence, and I knew that going into it, but I just didn't fully consider how much sexual violence would be on every page and how hard that would be to continue to read, which sounds so obvious, like no shit, that's gonna be hard to read. And yes, on some level I did know that, but I just felt so motivated to learn that I was like, I can push that aside and deal with it later. No, I can't. So what I decided to do instead was, instead of reading through every single chapter, what I did was I read the conclusion of each chapter, because this book is a historical text, and so each chapter, let me see if I can find you one. Each chapter has a dedicated conclusion. So like this is chapter 5. The conclusion starts on one page and goes into the next page. And that's what I did. I read through the conclusions. I read, I think, the first 2 or 3 chapters of this book in its entirety, and then I just moved into the conclusions, and I'm going to keep this one on my shelves and maybe go back to it at another time. But that's the only way I was going to be able to continue to move through this course and move into the next sections. I did read this one. If you follow my story graph, you'll see that I marked it complete because I read enough to at least understand the basic points that the author was saying without having to fully dive into all of the details, just read like summaries. Then I completed the other content that was needed for the course. I watched the lecture for week 2. I did the quiz for week 2. Now I'm ready to move into week 3. Now week 3, I need to go grab the book. Week 3, I'm going to be reading Never Caught by Dunbar. So week 3, I'll be reading this one, which is Never Caught by Erica Armstrong Dunbar. This is a National Book Award finalist, the Washington's relentless pursuit of their runaway slave, Ona Judge. Ona was a slave that ran away, and I think, yeah, it says Ona Judge, Martha Washington's chief attendant, figured out the subterfuge and risked everything in search of freedom. And this is the story of her escaping. And I believe she was never caught. But George Washington thought he could outwit and circumvent the law by sending his slaves south every 6 months and then resetting the clock, because there was a law that said, there was a Pennsylvania law requiring slaveholders to free their slaves after 6 months. George Washington, being the dickhead that he was, would send his slaves south and try to reset that clock. But the slaves were not stupid. They got on. Some escaped. And it's got a quote in here from Annette Gordon-Reed, who wrote The Hemingses of Monticello, which is another really important book that I want to read. But I am going to start this one hopefully today and make my way through this one. For historiography, it has been so fascinating. For week 3, we talked about secondary sources and how you read secondary sources. So I took a lot of notes. Secondary sources are like any kind of content that was created by someone who did not live through whatever they're writing about, typically with the goal of having like a graduate student or a historian read that and learn more, and just building on the knowledge that we have about that thing. So when you're looking through secondary sources are really there to interpret and analyze primary sources. Primary sources are the documents, artwork, clothing, anything we have from people that lived through that event. So when you're looking at secondary sources, there's kind of like different stages that you want to take with it according to this professor. So what is the title of the book? And if there is a subtitle, what does that tell you? When was it written? Why was it written? And who wrote it? And what authority did they have to write that thing? Then you want to read through the preface of the book, and that should tell you why the author wrote the book, what questions they're hoping to answer, how they plan on answering those questions, and then setting the stage for the arguments that they have. In the introduction, then, you will get how the author engages with the existing scholarship about that thing. What flaws or gaps in knowledge is the author identifying as a reason for why they're going to hopefully fill that gap? How will they address those flaws in their work? Why they wrote the book, so that's typically going to tie into the gaps that they identified, and then what their main arguments are. And then the professor said you should read the preface, you should read the introduction, and then don't read the book, go read the conclusion. And he says, what is the author's argument? And based on the preface, the introduction, and the conclusion, do you feel like you understand the author's perceptions and perspective and why they wrote it? You want to look through the footnotes and see, well, first, are there footnotes? Because if there aren't any footnotes, that's pretty questionable. You want to know where they got their sources. So if there's not footnotes, looking in the back of the book for all of their acknowledgments and bibliography and all of that, you then want to look to see what is the content that they are referencing. Are they only referencing primary sources? Are they only referencing secondary sources? Why are they using those sources? Do those sources make sense given what they are saying as a result of reading them? And then at the end, you want to evaluate the book. And so the professor said that there's really two main sections. So there's the use of evidence in the book, and two is the argument. So the first one, use of evidence. Does the evidence support the argument? So given what you've read, given the footnotes and bibliography and all of that, do you think that the author did enough of their own research to be able to support the argument that they're making with their book? Are their conclusions warranted given the evidence? So based on your own interpretation, your own knowledge of what you've read, does it track with what the author is saying? Is that something that like a reasonable person could say makes sense? Or are there alternative hypotheses that would explain the evidence? So is the author drawing conclusions and you're like, nah, that doesn't make sense. I think this actually points to this thing. If you come up with something else, that could be a potential good thesis or a good book or a paper or something like that. In the second part of evaluating the book, he says to look at the arguments. So is the argument original? Is it persuasive or compelling? Or is the author just restating previous arguments that have been said a bunch of times? Has it changed your thinking about the subject? Do you now feel like you have a better understanding or a more nuanced understanding of the topic? And then can you imagine another more compelling argument to come out of this evidence? So that goes up to the other one about alternative hypotheses. Given what you've read, your knowledge of this subject from your own research, do you think that there's still something missing here? Do you think that the author was on the right track but ended up in the wrong place? Or do you not agree with them at all and you think that it actually points to something else? So I thought that was all really, really fascinating. I love this idea of finally kind of learning how historians read documents. I am finding that a lot of this stuff is already things that I do in terms of like reading journal articles for work or things that I've done for other courses without necessarily being formally trained in like historiography. So that's really cool that like different fields are doing similar things, but maybe not to quite to the extent because I'm not studying something for a course or a paper. I'm just reading it for my own knowledge. That's been very interesting so far. I'm having a great time with both courses, even if one course is a little bit more absorbable than the other course just because of the content being so difficult in terms of like emotions and psychologically difficult, not in terms of like, oh, this is actually hard to understand. No, it's easy to understand in terms of like how just horrific people historically have been to Black bodies. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna wrap up this vlog here and then I'm gonna start week 3 for Black women's history and week 4 for historiography, and I will take you along as I am reading Never Caught. So thank you so much for checking in for this one, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye!